Kwe Kwe, greetings. We are back. Can you believe it? Yes. That last video, I I kind of was led, I think, by the ancestors. And by the end of that video, stuff was coming out that I just did not anticipate. But everything, the ancestors are, when they work with us, I think they just build upon, precept upon precept is what the monotheists say. And I see that that's what's really happening. And I've never done so many videos and feel okay doing it. Usually I didn't feel up to it. But the ancestors, I feel like they have me on fire right now. So without too much further ado, I know that I had something to show you in that last video. And this is, again, we're going to keep pouncing on those enumerated functions, those enumerated duties of Congress, because what we are learning is Congress has really taken on a whole lot of authority that no one gave them. Who do you think is giving it to them? Well, it all leads to the Moors, right? The Moors are the first to jump in line to recognize the foreign corporation on our land, right? That would be, so they're in bed with that monarchy that we know, and Anna is very clear. That's why I really appreciate Anna. She calls a thing, and she's not afraid to name Britain, because she knows she says she's not talking about the British people. She's talking about the monarchy. And if you're a monarchy, you have a high profile. You've got to expect that you're going to be spoken of, especially when you're in someone else's landmass. We can't speak. Oh, no, that's what my First Amendment was about. Okay, so we want to talk, we keeping it constitutional over here. We are not anti-government, but we are only anti-corporations that go against the Constitution that they were given in 1787. That's what we are about. So if that's a crime, guilty. Okay. So now, without further ado, we want to jump right into those enumerated functions. I think you're going to really enjoy this video. Wait, let me take a minute real quick because it's not queued up. It's not queued up. Let me pause. Okay, without wasting your time, we are now queued up for the video. So let's watch, and I'll try to be quiet as we watch this lecture on the enumerated powers of Congress. And so let me share my screen. Okay, I'm not seeing the screen that I'm supposed to have. Okay, but that's it. Okay, I don't know what's in front of it, but that's the screen. Okay, so we're sharing the screen. Okay, so let's listen. I hope my sound is not too loud, but here we're going to hear about those enumerated functions. You are going to enjoy this. Sit back, indigenous, so we can figure out where things got crazy. Here we go. Fair use, fair use. Let's just pause. We forgot to say fair use, but we say it now, fair use. So let's get that out there for educational purposes. Fair use. Thank you.
Welcome to class number 2. The title for this class is Enumerated versus Unlimited Power. What we want to talk about today is what it is our founding fathers gave us with the U.S. Constitution. Was it designed to empower a federal government that has limitless power, or one that was limited to few powers? And what the original intent of the Constitution was. So to begin with, I want to start off with a quote here from Thomas Jefferson, where he declares what his view on this question really was. Congress has not unlimited powers, but only those specifically enumerated. Now, the question I would ask is, if they're specifically enumerated, where would those be enumerated? Kind of an obvious question. That would be in the U.S. Constitution. That would be where we would look for that specific enumeration. Now, I want to talk about this concept first before we go much deeper. The concept of enumerated powers. What does the word enumerated mean? Well, it comes from the word, same root word as number does. Numbered, specifically listed. That means that these powers aren't just something that's implied or vague. They are specific. There's a list of them we can find in the Constitution, which we'll be spending some time on. I want to use an analogy today, though. Some of you have probably had the experience of taking a car into the auto shop. Let's say you take your car into the auto shop to have the brake pads changed. And when you come back the next day to pick up your car, you can't find your car. They assure you it's up in the northwest corner of the parking lot and you can't find it. Finally, they lead you over and, oh no, this is not my car. My car was blue. They said, well, we noticed you had a number of chips in the paint. We took the liberty to repaint your car for you. Now it's red. And not only that, you notice on closer inspection, you have a new car stereo system, a very nice, expensive one, but however, your bill reflects all of this as well. And yet further inspection reveals that your brake pads were never changed. The problem is you made the mistake of taking your car to the U.S. Congress auto shop because like Congress today, this auto shop is taking upon themselves numbers of powers that we never gave them. And then they're also neglecting the things they're supposed to be doing for us. If you then said to your auto mechanic, what gave you the idea that you could do this to my car? And they respond, well, you never said we couldn't. Does that fly? Clearly not. That we all understand that when you take your car to the auto shop, you fill out a work order, please change brake pads. That is an enumerated power list. Anything on the list they can do. And if while they're changing your brake pads, they notice that your wheel bearings are going out. Do they just change out your wheel bearings? Of course not. They give you a call. Say, we noticed this. Would you like to grant us a new enumerated power? That's not the way they say it, but that is what they're asking. And if you approve them to change out your wheel bearings as well, that's on their list now of enumerated powers. The same thing works for Congress. If it's on the list, they can do it. If it's not on the list, but they feel it's necessary, they can certainly request to the people, please grant an amendment to the Constitution granting new power. But otherwise, if it's not on the list, they don't have the power. Now, can you imagine for a moment, if we were to trim back the federal budget to fit within those enumerated powers, that'd mean we trim the federal budget by 80%. Do you think we could balance the budget? I think we could quite easily balance the budget and have a surplus and do something we haven't done for many years. That means pay off the national debt.
I just want to pause for a minute. What I have learned from the state nationals, this guy is doing a great job. This is indigenous. We need to take notes, please. If you want to run your country, if you don't, if you want to be dominated by the corporation, please tune away. And if your mindset is that, oh, we have to work with them and they're please tune away. This is not for you. This is for boss. This is for the bosses in the house. Okay, will the real bosses step up, please? All right, so you stay, okay? Okay, but what I want to say is Anna has made it very clear. What I appreciate that we can learn as indigenous. When I speak about state nationals, please don't feel that I'm chiding or, you know, like I'm taken away from us as Indians. I'm all the way Indian with this, okay? As far as I can possibly be. It's just that when I saw who was really recognizing the corporation for what they are, I had to take some notes as an indigenous. Now that I'm fully a little more aware of my standing as an indigenous, okay, now now I'm taking my seat, right? At the table, right? And I'm head of the table. Why? Because this is my land. And that's what an indigenous can say if they are of that mind. If they like, we have people that say, no, let's not send them packing. We don't want to say, well, that means if you're the type that likes to have a stranger running your household and you feel you can trust them, that's you. This is not for you. Okay. And I don't know any Indian who should want to be. We saw what we've seen. It's unending how we are despised by this system. So I don't understand. I'm wondering why we think that we can work with this bunch. Okay. But what I stopped this video to say is Anna has made it clear that there is no national debt. It is a ledger book entry that only needs somebody to take the pen and balance the ledger book with a swipe of a pen. Why? Because there's no gold and silver backing this fake ass money. So why are we stressing about a debt? Debt is incurred when there's money involved, real money. But if we're just using monopoly money, there is no debt to pay. The only thing that's supposed to happen is that we are supposed to discharge any debts. Any debts that we have, this corporation was supposed to discharge them. Why? Because there is no gold or silver involved. Okay, so this is the only thing one of the things that caught me about he says and he's still making a huge point. If this Congress would stop all the spending, well, we wouldn't have the bottom line is they shouldn't even be spending, because as he's going to point out to us, they're doing way too much and charging us shit that they never should have been doing, for shit they never should have been doing. Okay. But this debt, no, there's no debt. It's a ledger book entry that only requires that you balance the book with the swipe of a pen. Okay. And that's all I'm going to say. I can't make it any more clear than that. So let's continue. Fair use. This man is doing a great job.
That's really what we need to be doing, and I think this is the only way we could ever do so, is if we were to get our federal government to rein itself back in, or we rein it in, to fit within the bounds prescribed by the Constitution.
We? Who's the we? Well, we have to be head of the household. Who's head of America's household? Okay, so yes, as I said in the last video, the state nationals have a degree of authority, but not over indigenous. You see, I think that some of the state nationals think that they're just like us. This would not fly in any other country. If you go to China, sorry I use you all the time, China, but we do a lot of business with you, so you're not going to start. The Chinese are going to know that you're not Chinese. Okay, they know who the foreigner is in any other landmass. What I'm trying to say is America is no different. America is not this magical place where you come here and you become an Indian just by coming here and getting a few paperworks. No, not when the indigenous are back in the house. So this is not a diss to the foreigner. It's just reminding the foreigner, and they know this. They've just been duped by a corporation that's trying to put them in our place. But the foreigner knows anywhere else you go, this ain't going to fly. You can't do this on some other landmass. Go to Germany and say, I'm a German, and they know damn well you not. And you're going to assume that you have every authority that they have. No, you don't. And you don't, truth be told, you can't run their government for them either. So that's why the drop that I got today was probably the biggest bomb that the ancestors have ever given me the authority to drop. When they said that there is no other authority, especially a foreign one, the state nationals are going to have to answer to us once we take our proper seat. But right now, they know that there ain't nobody in that seat. And the way the Congress got it's like Indians are a second-class citizen on their own land. Not in real life. That's in corporate fairy tale land, not in the law of the land, not the constitutional or continental constitution, I should say. So the Moors created a fictional world where other people get to play like they're the Indians, or they have the same amount of power as Indians do. No, you're not. No, you don't. Again, I can't even go to your foreigners' homelands and call that kind of shot. Your governments in your homelands will not allow me to do that. They will look at me straight up and say, "You're not one of us. You better sit your fast ass right down. Have several seats. You don't run this show." And if they do give me some power, give me some authority, they're gonna monitor my ass. And the first time that they see me acting out of line or trying to take over, maybe I'm out. What I'm saying is it's the same thing here in America. You've just been lied to. This foreign corporation made you think that the foreigners running the show up in here. That's incorrect. That's incorrect. All they did was reclassify us and then presumed to start to eliminate us. Like I said, when you go to reclassify someone, there is an end to that. It's not just reclassify and leave them alone. The next agenda is getting rid of that ass. Okay, that's the whole reason to misclassify, so you're not protected by any of the laws you laid out for the foreign. Now they're using it on you, against you. Okay, so let us continue. Fair use.
Now, I want to draw your attention to this handout called U.S. Constitution Roadmap. It's like a table of contents. The legislative department is the entire first page, Article 1. As you turn over to the back side, you see Article 2, the executive department, Article 3, judicial department. Notice how much smaller those are than the powers of Congress. Congress takes up the entire half of this whole document. And that's about how it works out in the U.S. Constitution as well. The section that describes how Congress shall function and what their powers are and their limits and so on is roughly half of the U.S. Constitution, which gives you an idea of who of the three branches has the most power, that is Congress. We'll illustrate that a little bit later on in today's lecture. The next thing I want to point out is on this front side, the largest section in Article 1 is this white one. Notice how it goes Article 1, and then there's Section 8, which is Congress, powers granted to Congress. And then in Section 8, there's 18 clauses. Article, section, and clause is the way the Constitution is laid out. It's very much like in the Bible where you have book, like the book of Matthew, and then chapter 1 and verse 1. Article, section, and clause is very much like book, chapter, and verse. Now, this largest section is the list of powers. This is the enumerated powers of Congress in Section 8. That's the list of powers that they can legislate on. They can make laws on any of the things on these 18 clauses, and only that. And if it's not on that list, they don't have the power. Now, in the U.S. Constitution itself, the very first line after the preamble, if you have your pocket Constitution with you, in this version, it's on page 11. Right after the preamble, we find Article 1, Section 1, and Clause 1. The very first thing it defines is this: all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in Congress. What's legislative power? Legislative power is lawmaking. Lawmaking power. So all power to make laws is given to whom? Go ahead. Congress. All power to make laws given to Congress. Now here's your quiz. If any of you are good at math, you may remember those if-then questions. If all legislative power is in Congress, then how much power is left over for the president to legislate, to write new laws? None.
Now, if I want to pause right there, he's saying the president doesn't have power to make laws. So when you have Biden making some executive order about shots and jabs, baby, he's out of order, okay? Out of order. Outside of his jurisdiction. Let's continue. Fair use.
You're sure about that? Does he ever legislate? Unfortunately, yes. Frequently. And we're not just talking about our current president, but virtually every president in my lifetime, and probably quite a long time before, have legislated without Congress being involved. They write an executive order and sign it, and this is a new law. That violates the very first line after the preamble of the Constitution. For the president to write law himself, he's taking the power of one of the other two branches, which was clearly defined for Congress and Congress only. That's a usurpation of power. Now, again, this if-then question, the next one is, if all legislative power is in Congress, how much legislative power is left to the Supreme Court? None? You're sure? Do they ever legislate? Again, unfortunately, they do.
This is what blew my mind. Indigenous, are you listening? This is all for you. This is all for my indigenous, not for the Moors. They are foreign. They just got some kind of cognitive malfunction of the brain or something. They still working with the idea that the Pangea and all that bullshit. They think that they got some leftover authority from when the earth split into other sit your stupid ass down. Y'all too smart to be that stupid. So I want to say that this is what shocked me. Do you know that the Supreme Court is not supposed to be making laws, indigenous? Are we listening, indigenous? I'm trying to, the ancestors are using me to try to tell you something. You got to take authority, indigenous. We can't half-step it on this. The next chance we get will probably be in another 25,000 years. I've learned this from the priesthood themselves. They told the secrets in the book, Yaqub, Father of Mankind. They told a lot of their secrets through Elijah Muhammad, or, Fard and Elijah Muhammad's. They're telling a lot of their secret, but they're giving it a twist. Like I told you, they can tell you the truth. They just got to put their own spin on it and make you think that to get to this truth, you got to be a Moor, you got to be Islamic, you got to be Hebrew. Well, didn't the Moors tell us once again that they are the custodians? So they're only giving it out if we join one of their monotheistic religions. That's the only way we're going to get our history back, by completely divorcing ourselves from our bloodline, and then you'll give me my history? So you think you're a righteous custodian? You're a wicked, evil custodian at best. And I don't even like to use those kind of terms like evil and all that. I really prefer not to, but they embody that so much that I can't help it. The Moors. Okay? So, yeah, check out what he's about to say about Supreme Court making precedents through some kind of lawmaking. They're out of line. You don't believe when a brother tells you, well, here's your white Caucasian brother that you trust underneath all the drama. Let's hear what the brother got to say. He tells you the truth. And you want it from someone who the Moors intended to use as your enemy. They say, what is that saying? When your enemies become your, it's not that one, but the thing that was made to take you down was the exact same thing that's going to help bring you up. Listen to what the brother got to say about the Supreme Court. Fair use. Do we have to rewind a little bit because I done talked too much again? Let's go back a little bit, maybe not that far. Maybe 11. Okay, maybe 4.
Again, unfortunately, they do. A classic example is Roe versus Wade, which hundreds of years of history were suddenly diverted in a different direction by a ruling of the Supreme Court.
Supreme Court.
And as we're told today, Roe versus Wade, legalizing abortion, is settled law. If Roe versus Wade is settled law, who wrote the law? It wasn't the legislature, it wasn't Congress, was it? It was the Supreme Court. So in that way, that clearly violates the very first line of the Constitution.
Boom! Did y'all catch that? I know you did, but I got to drop a bomb or something. Make some kind of bomb noise. How many of us knew this? I'm not saying I did. Trust me on that. But once I got wind of the enumerated powers, I learned that from Anna von Reitz from the State Nationals. I'm just saying we can learn so much from the State Nationals, indigenous. That don't mean I'm dissing us, not by a long shot. I want us to be in the superior position. That's all I want for us, really, truly. But I do understand that some of us are not fit for that because we just don't have the mind for it. Again, I'm talking to indigenous who are ready to do some real work in terms of taking your place, not secondary, not under the corporation. So we got to hear this again, y'all. I'm sorry, we're gonna go back. This Supreme Court thing kind of knocked me for a loop. A lot of this is knocking me for a loop. It really, really, really is. Okay, let's go about here. Okay, fair use.
Supreme Court. None? You're sure? Do they ever legislate? Again, unfortunately, they do. A classic example is Roe versus Wade, which hundreds of years of history were suddenly diverted in a different direction by a ruling of the Supreme Court. And as we're told today, Roe versus Wade, legalizing abortion, is settled law. If Roe versus Wade is settled law, who wrote the law?
Who wrote it?
It wasn't the legislature, it wasn't Congress, was it? It was the Supreme Court. So in that way, that clearly violates the very first line of the Constitution. If we just...
And I'm sorry, indigenous. I really want all of it. So a lot of us are quoting, including myself. I'm humble. I ain't trying to stage y'all. I thought Supreme Court law was it too. They don't have the authority. Do you see how much authority we have, how much house cleaning we have to do, indigenous? Who do you think has the authority to do it? Why do you think we were denationalized on our own land? Again, Africans have never been denationalized. Ain't nothing over there that the Moors is threatened by. They're threatened only by us, American Indians. That's why they want to be your best brother. I'm your brother, I'm your friend. Sit your sorry ass down out of here. You ain't nothing to me. You might be some kind of relation, but you definitely ain't the one that's for me, okay? You are for yourself. So get out of my face with that, hush up that noise. You better go back to Morocco with that bullshit. That's the only ones you got domination over, okay? And actually everyone outside of America, unfortunately, the Moors have a claim on. But not you, indigenous. That's why you're the lowest status in the world. In the entire world. In the so-called free world of America, where do you take up residence and sort of got a little maybe we could call it your kingdom? That would be in the prison industry complex. Y'all are kings in prison. Oh, y'all, our indigenous brothers is just the dominant thing in prison. But you're slave in prison. In the free world, they don't got this in Africa. They ain't locking up them Africans like they locking you up, indigenous, choking you out and shooting you down. Ain't doing that in Africa, because the Moors ain't threatened by shit in Africa. Who has the history that the Moors need? That would be you, indigenous, but you don't like Tamari. You think that's that foreign stuff. That's that what do y'all call it? That what do you call pagan stuff? That's that crazy stuff. That's your stuff, and it was first. Whatever it was first, and it was yours. Own it so that you can take your throne back. That's all I'm saying. So let's hear about this Supreme Court. Oh my gosh, they don't not supposed to be making no laws. And did you catch how the laws are supposed to be made? Congress is supposed to come and ask us, can we, indigenous, can we begin some legislation on this? And if we say no, guess what? It's a no. It's a no. He said that earlier. I hope you caught that, because I know you don't want me to keep going back because you're trying to watch this video and I keep interrupting you. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. I'm sorry. Let's continue. I think I got to go back. He's talking about the Supreme Court, y'all. This is important. This is important. We got to hold our own court, y'all, and that's our authority, okay? Over the Supreme Court, who ain't supposed to be making no laws. Unless we say, well, no, we didn't design it that way. We said Congress. We gave Congress all of that, and they used it to pop us down to shit in this country. Thank you, Congress. I gave you some power and you found a way to use that shit to shoot me down. I'm back. Resurrected. Very use. Let us continue. I'm rewound a little bit.
Congress, how much legislative power is left to the Supreme Court? None? You're sure? Do they ever legislate? Again, unfortunately, they do. A classic example is Roe versus Wade, which hundreds of years of history were suddenly diverted in a different direction by a ruling of the Supreme Court. And as we're told today, Roe versus Wade, legalizing abortion, is settled law. If Roe versus Wade is settled law, who wrote the law? It wasn't the legislature, it wasn't Congress, was it? It was the Supreme Court. So in that way, that clearly violates the very first line of the Constitution. If we just followed this much of the Constitution, a major portion of what's going on in our nation would stop, because the president is legislating quite actively, as is the Supreme Court. This would rein in a good portion of that. Now, the next part I want to focus on is the phrase hearing granted. All legislative powers, hearing granted. The point is, all the legislative powers that were hearing granted in that part we just covered, Article 1, Section 8, clauses 1 through 18, that's where it is hearing granted. And any that is not hearing granted, well, then the 10th Amendment applies. The powers that are not delegated to the United States by this Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. What does that mean?
It means that for 1 minute, we got to say something. I'm sorry, indigenous. We learned in the video before the last that the original Constitution only had 3 amendments. So right now we're looking at the 10th Amendment. So what is that, indigenous? What did we learn? That 10th Amendment was unconstitutional. These people have been frauding us like there's no tomorrow, okay? So what that tells me is that I got to side-eye this 10th Amendment. We're going to have to look at the 3 amendments because those are the only legitimate ones. After that, we did not, I want to say we didn't have a quorum. Let's use that word, because the South walked out and never came back. But the North continued with Lincoln, is what I recall is what happened. They continued without the South involved. They didn't have the authority to do that. So any amendments after the 3rd one, I want to go far as to say any constitution after the 1787 one, it's unconstitutional. Because if they're doing all this stuff based on the 1789 and the 1790, then they must be by categorically unconstitutional. Because if these 2 secondary constitutions allow for all this chicanery to go on, that like these amendments that are not really truly amend. Now we know. I always heard something about there was no, I forgot what they call it. They weren't ratified, something to that effect. But besides the ratification, there was not a full Congress once the South walked out. So that's the idea here. So now we gotta understand that even though this brother is breaking it down for us, we still, as indigenous, have to keep breaking that shit down even more. Because this 10th Amendment is not constitutional. So that means the powers, these powers are not really legit, okay? We're going to keep listening to this, but I just have to stop where I know what I know that I know. And what brother told us in the video before last, forgot which one said it, but it had something to do with, you know, after the Third Amendment, though, no, it was our actual, you know, our melanated brother is the one who said that. I believe he's the one that broke that down about there's only 3 legitimate amendments. After that, the people are really not involved anymore. You know, the Indians or we the people are not involved. You know, and this is all before, I believe this is, wait, no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. I was going to say it's before the United States citizen creation, but no, I don't believe it was. I have to get back on that. But let's finish. I just want to talk about these amendments and the ones that are legit versus the ones that are not. This 10th Amendment is unconstitutional. It was unconstitutionally put into the Constitution. Okay, fair use. And let's go back a little more again. I'm sorry, because I talk a lot and then we lose what he was saying. Okay.
Because the president is legislating quite actively, as is the Supreme Court. This would rein in a good portion of that. Now, the next part I want to focus on is the phrase hearing granted. All legislative powers hearing granted. The point is, all the legislative powers that were hearing granted in that part we just covered, Article 1, Section 8, clauses 1 through 18, that's where it is hearing granted. And any that is not hearing granted, well, then the 10th Amendment applies. The powers that are not delegated to the United States by this Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. What does that mean? If it's not on this list, that power does not belong to the federal. It belongs to either the states or to the people. Now, in some cases, some things are prohibited to the states. You'll find that primarily in Article 1, Section 10. There's a list. It says no state shall, no state shall, no state shall, all throughout Article 1, Section 10. We'll go into some of those a little bit later in Lecture 3 in particular, no state shall section. So some things, it's not appropriate for the federal nor the state governments to be doing. Some powers are reserved only to the people. Some things are not appropriate for government to be involved in at all. That is probably the simplest description of constitutionalism 101 I could give you. Only Congress can legislate. Congress can only legislate on those enumerated powers found in Article 1, Section 8. And anything else is a power left to the states or to the people. If everyone understood that much of what our federal government's involved in, it would not be. So considering the fact that our federal government has stepped far beyond the bounds prescribed by the Constitution, it's become popular lately. Many states have started pushing forward for nullification type bills. What nullification is simply on a state level is when a state stands up and says, we do not recognize the authority of the federal government to legislate in this area. It's not in their jurisdiction, therefore we are not going along with it. Very simple concept, but there's been a lot of concern about this. The media has certainly done their share of warning people against it. I'd say probably one of the most common excuses or reasons for fearing nullification was expressed by a governor of one of the Western states recently when he said this. We can't have the states picking and choosing which laws they want to obey. That would lead to anarchy. And there is some truth to that. I have to admit, if the states were simply to pick and choose which laws they like that come from the federal government, then the federal really has no real power. From lecture number 1, you might remember there was a chart on the screen where it showed kind of a big wedge. Over on this side, 0% government. On the far other side is 100% government.
That's another place where I think I should stop. What I did learn from the state nationals, and maybe you'd have to look that up, but the states are supposed to have more authority. They're nation states. So it was said, what I recall, and I do recall it well, a portion of sovereignty was given to the states and a lesser authority was given to the feds. So in actuality, the way the system was originally designed, the states had power over their own state. And that's what I recall. That's why I'm jumping in. So what he's saying is not ringing fully true to me. He's coming from an angle that the feds are supposed to have all this power. No, they're not. The states had more power, and more of our sovereignty was given to the state, the sovereignty came from the people. And the Indians are already an authority. We were authority from the very beginning. We were just being hijacked by war games. I think they were like, when I say that, I mean, we have these foreigners come, then they start a war, and then we have to get involved. And then as we're involved, they're acting like we came with them. No, we were already here. They're acting like somehow we had to fight for our free. We were already sovereign. We were just helping the pilgrim. And you had a bunch of people from Europe that looked like us, and they had a king, not us. But that was the whole reason why they did it that way. They wanted to mix it up like, no, y'all, are you sure we not your king? Because you look just like the people we dumped here. So in history, we're going to be able to say that you were our subjects in a way, even though we know we coming for you. As we come chasing the European down your street, we are also chasing you. In effect, that's what they are. In other words, they come to collect their subjects, but in the process, they're netting us too. Like, oops, we got you too. Oops. And then they tell a story that like we are the foreign. So anyway, I just want to throw that in, that the feds were not supposed to have more authority than the states. That's a whole lie as well. So fair use again. Let's see if we can continue.
And 0% government being anarchy, 100% government being any form of a totalitarian state with all power in the government. And that our U.S. Constitution was really the balance between those two. That too little government leads to chaos, but too much government causes problems as well. We want to make the government strong enough to protect our rights, but not strong enough to abuse us in the process. Now, prior to the U.S. Constitution, we were living under the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation, they concluded, were too close to this side of anarchy. They didn't have enough real power to do the jobs we gave them to do. For example, we gave our Congress, under the Articles of Confederation, the responsibility to raise an army to fight for our independence from Great Britain. And yet they had no power to tax. They could request tax money from the states, but they couldn't enforce it. And because of that, that alone, among many other reasons, but that alone nearly cost us the war, because they couldn't raise the money to fund the war. And what they finally resorted to was just printing the money, print more and more.
From what I understand, Britain financed the war. That's what came up, and did both sides. So that's the what I recall of that situation. So let's go back a little bit. So they couldn't. They could. They did raise. They couldn't even raise enough taxes because they really didn't have that authority. In other words, they couldn't demand it. It was more like like they always told us. It's not. We always have these voices saying that taxes are not. They're voluntary. But then they hide how it's voluntary because they want us to pay. So they don't let us know that it's voluntary. But Indians, we're not even supposed to be involved in none of that anyway. Voluntary or involuntary, we ain't supposed to be getting taxed. But they put a spin on that too. They got some excuse for why. The truth is because you turned us into United States citizens. That's what happened. That's how you were able to tax us. End of story. Fair use. We went back a little bit. Let's continue.
Raise an army to fight for our independence from Great Britain. And yet they had no power to tax. They could request tax money from the states, but they couldn't enforce it. And because of that alone, among many other reasons, but that alone nearly cost us the war, because they couldn't raise the money to fund the war. And what they finally resorted to was just...
I'm sorry, that I correct myself. I said they couldn't enforce us paying the pilgrims paying taxes. That's what he said. I corrected. Okay, and I do want to go back. I'm sorry, I'm dragging you guys back. I'm sorry, but all of this is we need to hear it more than once, if you ask me. Okay, but I guess that's why you can rewind it, and I can just keep playing it and stopping it all the damn time. But yes, go back just a little bit because this is such a drop for me, and I hope it is for you. It really should tell us. Now we've seen several videos now, well enough that we should know the fraud that's being committed. Okay, starting with the fact that they're in office every day when we said at least once a year is just fine, right? So we know something ain't right, right? But no one talks about these things. I don't know if I don't know if people heard it before. I mean, I found the video that said it. I didn't hear it before that. And I never hear anyone else talking about it. But anyway, fair use. Let's go back a little bit.
Now, prior to the U.S. Constitution, we were living under the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation, they concluded, were too close to this side of anarchy. They didn't have enough real power to do the jobs we gave them to do. For example, we gave our Congress, under the Articles of Confederation, the responsibility to raise an army to fight for our independence from Great Britain. And yet they had no power to tax. They could request tax money from the states, but they couldn't enforce it. And because of that alone, among many other reasons, but that alone nearly cost us the war, because they couldn't raise the money to fund the war. And what they finally resorted to was just printing the money, print more and more of the continental dollars. And we'll talk about that a little in lecture 3 as well. But you can see the problem. If the federal has no real power and the states can truly pick and choose, yes, that would be a problem. And yet on the other end of the spectrum, are the states required to go along with anything the federal government says, no matter what? If that were the case, then we truly have an unlimited government. Whether they're within their bounds of the Constitution or not, we go to the other end of that spectrum, we end up in tyranny. And so, where do we draw the line? Is there a clear line we can draw between what is appropriate for the states to go along with, whether they like it or not, and what is appropriate for them to nullify? And of course, I would say yes, the answer is the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is very clear and defining on what those laws can be and what they cannot be. There is one other excuse that I see for staying away from nullification, and that is, in the last legislative session, we had a state legislator who proposed a number of nullification-type bills, saying the federal government has no authority in this realm, so we will not be observing this law, or something of that nature. And of course, he portrayed himself as a strong constitutionalist. And the national media picked this up. He got national attention for it. And they said, apparently his love for the Constitution does not extend to the Supremacy Clause. So that's the other one, is the Supremacy Clause. It's found in Article 6, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution. And here's what they want you to believe it says. This is not what it says. This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be passed by Congress, that's the part that they don't want you to know what it really says, shall be the supreme law of the land. So what this is implying is any law that's passed by Congress is the supreme law of the land, regardless of whether or not it's on the list of enumerated powers. If they pass it, it's constitutional and supreme. But a simple reading of the Constitution resolves this question. Because Article 6, Clause 2 doesn't say that. It says this Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land. Made in pursuance thereof. And by the way, on your class handout, that is answered to question number 1. There's a fill in the blank. Made in pursuance thereof is your first answer. Now, what does that mean? Made in pursuance thereof, thereof meaning referring back to the Constitution. Pursuance of the Constitution. What does it mean to pursue? To follow? Closely follow? So to have a law that is made in pursuance of the Constitution literally means that that law is in following or in keeping with the Constitution, the powers granted by the Constitution. Now, what does this imply about laws that are not made in pursuance thereof? If laws made in pursuance of the Constitution are supreme, then laws not made in pursuance are not supreme, right? In fact, Marbury versus Madison, a Supreme Court ruling, declared all laws which are repugnant, in conflict with the Constitution, are null and void. They're not laws at all. So this is directly contrary to what the media was saying about the state legislator. Apparently, his love for the Constitution does extend to the Supremacy Clause because only those laws made in pursuance thereof are supreme. And all other laws are not laws at all. Now, this brings us to the oath of office. All of our state legislators and governors swear an oath of office to what? Well, this seems to be what so many of them think they have sworn. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will be subject and subservient to the federal government, and that I will support and defend all laws passed by Congress or the Supreme Court or the President, never questioning their authority to legislate in all matters whatsoever. That seems to be what they feel like they're supposed to be doing. Whatever the federal government does, we must comply with. That's not what their oath said. The oath of office, whether it's a federal oath or a state oath or whatever, all elected officials and people appointed to various positions of government, even our military, police, sheriffs, and so on, they're required to swear an oath, something of this nature. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Now, it's those domestic ones in particular that I'm concerned about. Ancient Rome and the ancient Roman Republic never fell to an external power until they first crumbled internally. And we will be the same. And so it's those domestic ones first that we need to worry about. Now, simple tests. I always like to make things as simple as possible. You want to understand what really is constitutional and what is not. When someone's bringing forth an interpretation of here's what the Constitution means, remember this simple test that I'm about to give you. It comes from 2 quotes from our founding fathers. First, James Madison in Federalist number 45. Now, the Federalist Papers, as a quick side note, was a list of 85 letters to the editor, really, written by James Madison, John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton. These letters were written to the papers of the state of New York to help the people of New York understand this Constitution that was being proposed, to encourage them to go along with it and encourage their state to ratify it. So the Federalist Papers is probably the greatest single source of what was the original intent of the Constitution. It's the greatest authority on that topic. Now, Federalist number 45, James Madison points out, the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are vague, undefined. No, few and defined. just the opposite of vague. They're few and they are defined. That means they're clear. The other quote here from Thomas Jefferson says, to take a single step beyond the boundaries thus specially drawn around the powers of Congress is to take possession of a boundless field of power, not longer susceptible of any definition. The two phrases I want you to remember now are few and defined and boundless fields of power. That's the test. This interpretation that someone's sharing with you, this is what the Constitution means. By that interpretation, can we justify boundless fields of power? Or by that interpretation, is that a narrow, few, and defined understanding of the powers? And we'll repeat this test a few times today. So that's where we are today. I want you to always remember this enumerated powers versus a boundless field of power. Few and defined or boundless powers. That's our simple test we'll be applying to the Constitution. Now, contrary to this, the Attorney General between 1941 and 1945, a man by the name of Francis Biddle, he gives us his interpretation of how to interpret the Constitution. The government of the United States can do anything not specifically prohibited by the Constitution. Does that sound like few and defined or boundless power? Boundless power. That sounds like our auto mechanic, doesn't it? How big would the work order have to be when you take your car in to list everything you don't want them to do specifically? Please don't change my left or right headlights. Please don't change the dome light. Please don't change out the fourth lug nut on the front right wheel. And the work order would have to be huge. In the same way, how big would the Constitution have to be if we listed what they could not do rather than the few powers we were actually giving them? It wouldn't be this size, I tell you that. It'd probably be a lot more like the size of most of the bills they're passing today, where it takes reams of paper to print it. And no one would know what it said, and no one would be able to read it. Wisely, they chose to simply list those few powers you do have. Then if it's not on the list, you can't do it. So he's clearly reading the Constitution in reverse. And of course, Congressman Pete Stark, just bring things to modern day, this concept, this idea still persists. In this country, the federal government can do pretty much whatever it wants to. Yet again, boundless or few and defined. That's clearly boundless power, isn't it? Now, I want to bring things down to a very simple description. There's really 5 places in the Constitution that are frequently exploited and stretched beyond their original intent to find unlimited power. The first one we've already covered, that being the Supremacy Clause. Whatever is passed by Congress is supreme and you must comply. The other 4 consist of the General Welfare Clause. You've probably heard that used before. Found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. We'll go into that one next. But the rest of the list, number 3 is the Necessary and Proper Clause. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. Frequently also known as the Elastic Clause, because this one you can just stretch to fit any power you could imagine into it. Or also the Implied Powers Clause, it's also known as. Number 4, the Interstate Commerce Clause. This one's had a fair amount of popularity and publicity lately, because it's the one that our national health care law is justified by, we're told. This is why they can do this new law. Found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. We'll go into that one as well, and then we'll conclude with treaty law. So let's start with number 2 now, the General Welfare Clause. Here's what it does say. Congress shall have power, and then the ... is various ways of raising money. The Congress shall have power to raise money to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare. That's the only 3 things Congress can spend money on. Pay debts, provide for the common defense, and general welfare. Now that's been taken to mean, especially the general welfare, that Congress can do anything it wants to as long as it's for the general good. Not at all what was originally intended. We'll demonstrate that. First of all, James Madison, again, declares if Congress can do whatever in their discretion can be done by money and will promote the general welfare, then the government is no longer a limited one. He's using our same test, isn't he? Is this limited government few and defined or boundless fields of power? He's saying if that's the interpretation, we're talking about boundless power. We do not have limited government. And yet that is the popular understanding of that clause today, as wrong as it may be. Thomas Jefferson again points out, Congress has not unlimited powers to provide for the general welfare, but only those specifically enumerated. Specifically enumerated? The powers of general welfare are specifically enumerated? Well, yes, they are. In fact, that's about half of what's in Article 1, Section 8. I'll show you that in just a moment. One more quote from James Madison, and then we'll get into it. He says, nothing is more natural nor common than to first use a general phrase and then to explain and qualify it by a recital of particulars. In other words, to introduce your topic, such as I'm writing a research paper on trees. I start off with the statement, the general phrase, trees are good. Then I'll recite some particulars, such as trees are good for shade, trees are good for wood, trees are good for the environment, for animals to live in, trees are good for helping have more oxygen in the air, and so on. Those are the recital particulars. Start with a general phrase and then give the specifics afterwards. That's exactly how Article 1, Section 8 is written. It starts off with at the top, Clause 1, the very first line, Article 1, Section 8. If you want to follow along, this is on page 17 in your pocket constitution. It starts off with, the Congress shall have power to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and the general welfare. And then the next 9 clauses, borrow money, regulate commerce, establish rules of naturalization and laws on bankruptcies, coin money, punish counterfeiting, establish post offices, post roads, promote science and useful arts by protecting exclusive right, that being like patents and that type of thing, constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, and then you jump all the way to the very end, 17, which is the second to last, which is the power to control land for limited purposes. Those are general welfare powers, and the reason I categorize these ones as general welfare is because everything else in Article 1, Section 8 is common defense. That's the 2 categories listed at the beginning, isn't it? Provide for the common defense and general welfare. That's our general phrase at the top, common defense and general welfare. And then here's the specific powers of common defense on this side and general welfare on that side. But all the powers fall into one of these 2 categories. Now, a year or so ago, I was grilling a congressman on his voting record. I like to do that type of thing myself. Asking him, where in the Constitution did you feel you have the authority granted to take our tax dollars and give it away to the governments of foreign nations, what's known as foreign aid? And I don't care what government we're talking about, where in the Constitution is it granted? And he said, well, that would depend on which foreign aid. In some cases, it would be under the General Welfare Clause, and some of it would be under the Common Defense Clause. My response to him was, well, I understand very, very well, I'm very familiar with the general welfare powers. They are specifically listed in clauses 2 through 9 and 17. Which one of those are you talking about? And while we're on the topic, the common defense powers, clauses 10 through 16, are specifically enumerated. Which one of those do you feel grants the power for foreign aid? This was on Facebook where he was campaigning for re-election. It was his campaign page. He deleted my question and then blocked me from asking any further questions. So I guess he didn't like the direction this was going. But you see the point. You can't use the common defense clause or the general welfare clause as an excuse for power if it's not listed in the specifics thereafter. That is the general welfare powers. This is the common defense powers. It's very clear. And that is all that the common defense or general welfare grants. Now, the next one, excuse number 3, the elastic clause, also known as the necessary and proper clause. Here's what it does say. The Congress shall have the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper. A few years ago, a friend of mine used this one with me. I was telling him his U.S. senator that he loves so much, doesn't tend to follow the Constitution very well. And he asked for some specifics. I gave him some. He says, oh, well, that's under the necessary and proper clause. Would you mind reading that with me? I say. Sure. And this is what he read. The Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper. And that sounds like few and defined powers or boundless. That does sound pretty boundless. And that is what it says. We have a problem here? Well, no. If you read it in context, the only problem is we didn't finish reading. In fact, if anyone ever uses this one with you, just ask them to read the next 7 words. You can read on if you'd like, but the next 7 words really clarify it, because it says, for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. What is that talking about? Congress has power to make all laws that shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. Let me show you where this appears in the Constitution. Right here at the bottom. You have Article 1, Section 8, the heading up there, the specific powers of general welfare, common defense, and then the conclusion, the necessary and proper clause. It says they have power to make all laws that shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, these powers that came before it. It's referring to this list of powers, isn't it? So if that's referring to this list of powers, either common defense powers or general welfare powers, does that give any new power? It doesn't. It clearly doesn't. In fact, my friend, when I shared this with him, would you mind reading the next 7 words? He read that and said, oh. And that was it. Let's go on to a new topic. And I think that's all we need to do on this particular excuse. You just read it in context. It resolves that for you very nicely. So the next one, and this one's a big one, the Interstate Commerce Clause. You have to realize that the Interstate Commerce Clause is actually part of a larger clause here. This is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, and it says, the Congress shall have power to, as a quick side note for a moment, as you read through the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, you'll notice every one of those clauses begins with the word to do this, and then to do that, to do this, to do that. All of those, just insert in your mind, the Congress shall have power to do each of those in Article 1, Section 8. So clause number 3, Congress shall have power to, and then we jump down to clause 3, regulate commerce. And then it talks about 3 areas they can regulate commerce. Regulate commerce with foreign nations, among the several states, and with the Indian tribes. It's a power of commerce. I would really call it the Commerce Clause, which specifies 3 different areas. But it's this one right here that they refer to as the Interstate Commerce Clause, commerce among the several states. And from that little phrase, I'm amazed what they've created. Back in the late 1930s, Congress decided that by this Interstate Commerce Clause, they have the power to regulate anything that happens to be commerce between states. So much so that they decided we're going to help our farmers out because they're struggling. We want the farmers to be able to make a good living wage without having to work so long and hard. So what they ended up doing was passed a law that farmers cannot raise more than a certain number of tons of grain. They limited the amount of grain that farmers were allowed by federal law to raise. And by 1942, there was a U.S. Supreme Court case known as Welker versus Filburn, where Farmer Filburn was being tried for raising more grain than allowed by federal law. And in his defense, he said, yes, I did raise that amount of grain, but I was not engaging in interstate commerce.
I want to stop for a minute. I'm hearing farmer, and I'm asking myself, I want indigenous to please hear. When we have our farms back, do you think that this corporation will have the power to tell us how much produce to raise? Does that sound right to your ear? You're a foreigner on my land. I'm here minding my business, doing what I've always done before your ass showed up, and you think you're going to tell me how much I can raise? How much crops I can raise? Who the hell are you? You better take that shit back home to wherever you came from, Britain or Morocco or Spain or wherever else. You don't get that kind of pull over here. See, this is what I mean when I really believe that this corporation is, when we gave them one of the powers to moderate commerce or whatever, this is not what we meant, because that is hindering commerce. If I was making enough, see, do you see how this would play out, indigenous? So say now you got your farmers popping, your food is selling, they love your produce. So this corporation is going to try to hinder you from making a living off of your land? Are you fucking kidding me? You see how much house cleaning we have to do up in this house, indigenous? Are you guys up to that? Or are you still going to argue with the Moors about who you are? You don't argue with someone regarding your identity. Even in the Moors' African Kwanzaa, I said this before, self-determination. That's something that they gave the Africans. And the Africans are talking about Kwanzaa and Kujijakalia and all this foolishness. Well, you know what? It's not foolishness, because you know what? Self-determination is what it's about. So then why are we arguing with Moors when we done told them what we identify as? And why are we continuing to argue with them? Do you see that they have us wasting time just arguing with them? Are you telling me, Moor, that you get to define who I am because you feel that you was a citizen of the whole earth or whatever? That shit don't fly in the real world. What you talking? You ain't doing that shit now. If you was, conceivably, we Indians wouldn't be in this predicament we're in if you was a citizen of the world that went before the Pangea. Get out of here with that foolish bullshit. You see how the Moors live in half in fantasy land when it's convenient? Just to get Indians to subscribe to that bullshit. So again, farmers out there, it's a new day. Can you feel a brand new day? Because ain't nobody gonna get to tell you how much produce. The gods are blessing you with high yield crops and harvest, and you think this ratchet little theft minded corporation is gonna put their hands in your prosperity? Why the hell shouldn't I sell this shit that I'm so blissed, BLISSED, to have? Because it ain't less. It's more than that. It's a abundant crop, and this corporation is going to try to decide how much you can sell because they're trying to keep you pinned to poverty. They don't want you to outsell the foreign crap. And you know what? It would have to be that whatever they're putting out is foreign to us, right? If they stop hindering your prosperity, farmers, then that means they're acting like a foreign entity. Why would they want to stop an American from being prosperous? Indians we got our work cut out for us, and it ain't nothing like I'm hearing anybody talk about. But you know what? I'm glad to be the voice. If that's what the ancestors want, so be it. Because this makes me happy. This makes me see in real life what sovereignty looks like, not in the mind of the corporation, which is giving you some redefined version of what sovereignty is, just like they redefined what a person is to include a corporation, because they're going to use that corporation as a person to basically make sure that you cannot get a leg up. Okay, that's why they needed to make the corporation a person, because they're coming after real people, and they want to make sure that it's an entity that they control that has a dominant position over regular real life men and women with this fictional person called a corporation. So fair use, we're going to listen to what the brother's about to say about what they did with the farmers and how the farmers got them to hush up that foolishness, just like we're going to have to, indigenous. So let's go back a little bit. And I say fair use again.
That farmers cannot raise more than a certain number of tons of grain. They limited the amount of grain that farmers were allowed by federal law to raise. And by 1942, there was a U.S. Supreme Court case known as Welker versus Filburn, where farmer Filburn was being tried for raising more grain than allowed by federal law. And in his defense, he said, yes, I did raise that amount of grain, but I was not engaging in interstate commerce, so I'm not subject to this limitation. I said, well, why do you figure that? Well, I wasn't engaging in commerce at all. I was raising the grain for my own use and to feed my animals. I never sold it. It wasn't commerce. It wasn't intercity commerce, let alone interstate commerce. And they said, yes, it was. How do you figure? Because if you had not raised the grain, but instead had to purchase it on the interstate commerce market, you would affect the price of grain. By raising grain and not purchasing, you're also affecting interstate commerce. By not purchasing, you're affecting interstate commerce. Astounding. That's quite a stretch, but again, let's take it back to our simple test. By this interpretation, by not participating in commerce, you're affecting commerce. What can Congress not regulate? If I choose to raise a garden in my backyard and partially feed my family from it, I'm engaging in less commerce because I'm not buying as much food from the store. By that justification, then, Congress can regulate my garden in my backyard and tell me what I can and cannot grow and how much. Correct? What if I were to do some work on my own home? I want to repaint my house, for example. I'm not engaging in commerce because I'm not hiring a contractor to do it. So therefore, my not hiring can be subject to congressional control as well. And they can regulate whether or not I get to paint my own house or if I have to hire someone to do it. And some countries in Europe do that very thing today. Last example, if I choose to have children or not have children, or have many children or few, all of those will affect my buying, my purchasing on the interstate commerce market. By this justification, could Congress then tell me how many children I can have or not? Would any government be so bold as to tell you how many children you can have? I guess that's already happened in other countries as well. And by this justification, they could do the same thing here under the Commerce Clause. Definitely not few and defined powers. That's unlimited government, without a doubt. But is that same justification that is used today to justify things like our new national health care law, which is being debated whether or not it's constitutional? I tell you today, clearly there's no doubt it is not authorized by those few enumerated powers of the Constitution. But just to show you what this does mean, what does this commerce power have to do with? What is the few and defined powers? Chief Justice John Marshall gives us a nice, clear description of it. He says, this power of regulation of commerce, must carry the same meaning throughout the sentence. What's he saying? Let's go back to it now. This power to regulate commerce is the same power, whether it's with foreign nations or whether it's among the several states. It's the same power. Can Congress tell France, for example, that your farmers cannot raise more than a certain amount of grain? Of course not. So this power to regulate commerce with France cannot do that, then the power to regulate commerce among the states cannot do that either.
We're going to stop for a minute. Sorry. What gave Congress, what made them think that they could regulate the farmers? Can anyone take a stab at that question? I think we know it. I just want to make sure we, get the loose threads. Why do you think Congress is coming at this farmer this way? Okay, this is my stab at that question. Once they made that farmer a United States citizen, he became a commercial entity. So his brand can never outsell whatever the government is trying to sell. What would probably happen in the long run is that they would say now his farm is doing really well. What I think the corporation will do then is try to some way buy him out, one corporation to another or whatever, or, but I'm just saying what gave Congress the idea that they should step to this farmer and tell him what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and how much to do it, it's because he was a United States citizen. The Congress couldn't do that to, say, an indigenous Indian or even a free person. They couldn't do it. They are taking these liberties because they have reclassified us, and we are no longer in the organic constitution. They have made us dead entities. So what they're dealing with is the capital letter version of your name, not you, the capital letter entity you. See, the real you, that's what the Continental Constitution dealt with. And that's why you had a Bill of Rights and you had a Declaration of Independence and all of that, because you were a real man or woman and you were speaking. Now, once you've been corporatized by making you a little franchise, now they can tax you. They can come and say you're growing too much. They can start saying that, they can make the president has this what he can do, that what do you call it, that executive orders and surpass Congress, and so can the Supreme Court. Just everything is all out of whack once they take away your authority, especially the American Indian, because you fell the farthest from authority. The jump from your authority to what they made you is the biggest jump in the history of jumps. They put you at the bottom. That's what the Moore system did. And they want us to say that we're Moors. You better get to stepping with that bullshit. Let's continue. Fair use.
Congress has no such power over foreign nations. Then they don't have the power over the states either. If it is truly the same power, and one of the things that John Marshall points out is that unless there is somewhere in the Constitution that more clearly defines that power, they are exactly the same power. Is there anywhere in the Constitution that differentiates between the power over the states here and the power over foreign nations? The answer is there is actually one place that does clarify the power. That would be found in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 5. In Article 1, Section 9, Clause 5 limits the power that Congress has over the states. Found on page 19 here, and it says, no tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any state. So saying that Congress does not have the power to allow any taxes or duties on trade between the states.
Indigenous, did you hear that? That's what the ancestors had me prophesy in the video before last. Remember, I said that I don't believe they're supposed to be taxing interstate trade, because that's what it's called when it's on the state same landmass. But you see, Congress, they about that money, y'all. So they taxing us even between the states. This man is about to tell you who was supposed to be taxed, just like I said, what the ancestors gave me. And they were right. I said that before I saw this video. Because what the ancestors do is give you common sense. And then you could break down all the bullshit. I said to you, if you recall, in the video before last, I was saying, it sounded like the young brother is saying that trade is different from commerce. And that would mean that anything going on inland is not to be taxed. Why would we tax each other on the same landmass? You know what I'm saying? If we're united. The tax was supposed to be coming from foreign, over the sea nations. That's what's supposed to get tariffs and taxes and duties and all of that. And that's what this man is about to say. Thank you, ancestors. You already told me that. You told me through my own mouth and the common sense that you put up in my head. I'm going to rewind this a little bit because he's about to drop another bomb on y'all. This corporation, see why we can't do business with them? Do you see what they're about? They taxing us when they supposed to be looking out for us and collecting money for us for our welfare from other nations that are doing business with us, that would like to do business with us, so they can make some of this cheddar. We're supposed to get a benefit from that. But who's taking our change? Who's taking our money? Who's taking our cheddar? The foreign corporation. The common brother ain't seeing none of this. None of our people are. They make money and they give it to who? The foreigner, as much as they can. But then the foreigner guy, they always, of course, they gangster like that. You're gonna pay them back, even if you're a foreigner. They looking for that pay. If you don't, as I said one time before, if you're not paying it back, well, they assume ownership of you. Either way, they win, because if they don't make you pay it back, you still they own you now, because they've created you for you a debt that you owe. And so according to how they look at things, well, then I just get to keep everything you have, on the down low. You won't know it, but that is what's really going on here. We own you. They can't do that with an indigenous. That's why they put us at the bottom. They can't own us because this is our landmass and we were here before them. But anybody they bring here, you are fodder to be exploited by this corporation. They trying to get rid of us because we're the only challenge to that. If we take our proper place and not talk about some fucking federally recognized this or federal benefits that. No, we don't want shit from them, because what they got to give us, baby, that's going to be enough. More than enough. More than enough. I think for the first time in history, they're going to have to give us a big, huge line of credit, because they're going to, they're going to cry broke, right? We don't got no money. Oh, you had it when you was going to give it to the Ukrainian families, didn't you? But when it comes to us, yeah, got no money. We got nothing. We poor. Them people, those members of Congress are not poor. They have big fat checks. No, they are millionaires. Them foreigners working for foreigners are millionaires, okay? You all got the money, you sure do. And if you don't got the money, you're gonna cough up that credit, baby. Everything is gonna be free for us, okay? Everything. We don't owe you shit. Look what you done took from us. Look at all the authority you took. You need to be sued for these crimes and fired. Hello. Now, shall we continue, please? Because he's about to drop a bomb on you right now about who's supposed to be taxed. Interstate or international, in terms of outside of state. See, I think when the city making us nation states, it was a good and a bad thing, because I think that's what Congress thinks they can do. They think, oh, you're a nation, so we can tax you. No, but we're united. And we're one landmass. You're just robbing us for your gain, because we don't see none of that benefit. It's supposed to be us getting money from the foreigner that we are doing business with, taxing their shit. But let's hear this drop. Fair use. You're going back a little bit.
There's actually one place that does clarify the power. That would be found in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 5. In Article 1, Section 9, Clause 5 limits the power that Congress has over the states. Found on page 19 here, and it says, no tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any state. So it's saying that Congress does not have the power to allow any taxes or duties on trade between the states. What power do they have with foreign nations? That's the only power they have with foreign nations. They can't tell France what they can do and what they can't do with their commerce. All they can do is put a tariff or impost or duty, meaning product coming from France, 10% tariff as it crosses our border. That's the only power.
Hello, did you hear that? So who's supposed to be getting taxed? Business between us as Indians with each other, they got to stay out of our business. This is why we don't want them involved in our commerce at all, because all they're doing is hindering our prosperity. That's what they're doing as the entity that they have become. That's what they're doing. I'm telling you, indigenous, we're supposed to be the federal government. I'm telling you right now. I'm telling you right now. We're not going to be, again, we're not going to be out like to exploit people, but we are going to do what's right in terms of these tariffs. When we get in charge, all foreign nations will have to pay a tariff to sell their stuff here. Basically, that's what he just said. We're going to go it one more time, and I think we'll end it for this because I know you don't want to be having these long ass videos, and this is just under an hour, this video, and we're going to keep it short because I know these things are long. But this is we gotta get this, so let's make it, a little bit shorter if we can. I know I'm going long, and it's going to be over an hour because I stopped and then spoke, but I had to. I just have to break this down to you from an Indian point of view. Okay, he's giving it to you from the state national level, or that would be his level. Man, he's doing a great job. See how much we can learn from the Pilgrim. See how much they're giving us. But do you see the work we have cut out for us if we take this game seriously? Because really, it's not a game at all. Our posterity is at stake. We have an entity that had a king declare that our land and our homeland is his possession forever. What we got to do is reverse that shit, and we got to denounce that kind of theory. No, King James America does not belong to you, boo-boo, or none of your posterity. You guys come from the UK, and that's where you're going back to, and that's where you belong. There's nothing disrespectful in that. There's nothing what do you call it, terroristic in that. This is just how it works. Again, we can't do it up in your house, can we? You're gonna make it very clear. I'm a king and I'm a queen. Yeah, okay. Then take your shit and go back to where you're the king and the queen, because you ain't the king and queen here. And you know damn well you're not. I don't care if you intermarry with American movie stars. That ain't good enough. That ain't gonna get you in when we clean this house. Okay? So here we go. He's dropping a bomb right now. Let's go in, okay? Fair use again. Going back just a little bit. I'm sorry I keep going back, but we got to get this work. Okay. And okay.
Found on page 19 here, and it says, no tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any state. So it's saying that Congress does not have the power to allow any taxes or duties on trade between the states. What power do they have with foreign nations? That's the only power they have with foreign nations. They can't tell France what they can do and what they can't do with their commerce. All they can do is put a tariff or impost or duty, meaning product coming from France, 10% tariff as it crosses our border. That's the only power that Congress has over foreign trade. And what it says here in Article 1, Section 9 is that power is forbidden between the states. The only thing they can do with foreign countries, they cannot do with the states. In fact, it's their duty to make sure that there are no tariffs between the states. Now, the reason they did that was prior to the U.S. Constitution. Under the Articles of Confederation, there were heavy tariffs between the states. If I wanted to transport my goods from, say, up in Rhode Island down through Massachusetts to some of the southern states, Massachusetts especially was guilty of this. They charged huge tariffs for anything crossing through their state. So much so that it was cheaper to buy products from Great Britain than it was from each other, because we put such heavy duties and tariffs on each other. And so that was the vision here in Article 1, Section 9, was to prohibit such things. So today we're taught that this power of commerce, power over the states, is an unlimited power. Originally, it was actually virtually no power. The only power that was there was preventing tariffs. And with foreign nations, they could apply tariffs. Now, just to prove that I'm not making this up, President James Monroe said exactly the same thing in 1822. He says, a power then to impose such duties and imposts in regard to foreign nations, and to prevent any on the trade between the states, was the only power granted. You'll find that's one of the answers on your sheet here. Number 7, a power then to impose such duties and imposts, and to prevent any on the trade between the states. That's the entire sum of the power of Commerce Clause, interstate and international commerce. The last one, treaty law. I've seen many emails about Secretary of State Hillary Clinton working on a treaty that would ban small arms from we the people owning them. Trying to create some kind of a gun ban with the United Nations and passing it as a treaty. And we're told that if the president and 2/3 of the Senate pass this treaty, it would override the Constitution. Uh-oh. Now, again, I'm sorry, but I have a hard time believing that one. Here's what the treaty clause says. This is actually part of the Supremacy Clause in Article 6, Clause 2. It says, this Constitution and all treaties made, or which shall be made. And then you want to skip over this part because if you read it, you might understand it. And then shall be the supreme law of the land. And that's what we're told the treaty law is about. Whatever is passed as a treaty is supreme, period.
And once again, I'm stopping. That's what we had before we were colonized with this foreign nation. They had the treaty with, but you know what? No more, no, not necessary anymore. I now see the message that the ancestors are trying to get out there is, why would you want to even treaty with an entity that's doing so much to this day? You're waking up, they're ignoring it. They're not encouraging good faith between them and yourselves. It's time that we take our seat. No more treaty with something that's on our land, that's foreign. We have to, unfortunately, American Indians, we no longer require a foreign entity on our land. After all these years of kicking our ass, and we wake up and we think, oh, let's do business with them. They've been doing business with us for a very long time now. We didn't know they were, but their business is about basically mopping the floor with your ass. That's their business, okay? Stripping you to nothing, making you nothing, shooting you in the streets, choking you out in the streets, locking you up for God knows how much time they want you to spend your life, and our brothers' lives wasted away in some prison learning how to be a freaking Moor, because that's what Islam basically is. And then they come out trying to a whole army of brothers done been converted and now trying to turn us into what they done found in prison. No, thank you. So you see, indigenous, no need for treaty with the corporation any longer. We've had enough of you. You broke all the treaties you had. There is no longer good faith between us. We will have our country back, thank you. And we have every right, indigenous. And if we don't think we do, I see that we are not ready for this. It will take another 25,000 years of your children and grandchildren and everybody, and you coming back, reincarnating into bullshit. We either fix this the right way, or we live with a broken nation that's, even in its brokenness, all it can do is kick our ass up and down the country. What do we really want here? We want to play games. We got a whole constitution backing everything I'm saying. Everything this man is saying in this video. And we scared of the liars. I was about to say we need a treaty, but you know what? Not when we don't have any foreigners to deal with, we don't. We can treaty with the other nations of the world, not the one that's on this land. That's because they are on their way out. No need. Thank you. We did that. We tried that before. It didn't work. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing and thinking you're going to get a different outcome. Bye-bye. Fair use.
And you're probably coming to recognize my pattern here. The part that's left out is the part that helps you understand the true meaning. What it says there is, all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be supreme. Under the authority, what authority? Where is this authority granted? Oh, yes, in the Constitution, that's right. So,
yes,
all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States. Now, you notice this one was worded a little bit different than the Supremacy Clause one, which said made in pursuance thereof. And the question's been raised sometimes in my classes. So why did they not just simply say in pursuance thereof? At this time, they already had on the books a number of treaties that were made not under the authority of the Constitution, but under the authority of the Articles of Confederation. And they didn't want this to strike down those treaties. This recognizes the authority that they were made under at the time. Those treaties that were made under the Articles of Confederation was the authority of the United States at that time. Once the Constitution was adopted, all new treaties must comply with the new authority, which is the Constitution. Now, again, I'm not making such things up. I want to demonstrate to you now a couple different places that show what the treaty law really means. First of all, another great quote, Thomas Jefferson says, I say the same as to the opinion of those who consider the grant of the treaty-making power as boundless. If it is, then we have no Constitution. If the president and the Senate, with a two-thirds majority, can override anything in the Constitution with a treaty, then we don't have a Constitution. Now, the next place I want to go to is a Supreme Court ruling, 1957, known as Reed versus Covert. And in this one, here's a portion of it. It says, it would be manifestly contrary to, and then it lists three different things. It would be manifestly contrary to the objectives of those who created the Constitution, as well as those who were responsible for the Bill of Rights, and then lastly, let alone alien to our entire constitutional history and tradition. Pretty strong words. This is completely out of the question of anything we've ever done constitutionally, those who wrote the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and our entire history, to do what? To construe Article 6, the treaty power, as permitting the United States to exercise power under an international agreement, and here's the key phrase, without observing constitutional prohibitions. Treaties are subject to prohibitions of power of the Constitution. In other words, if Congress has no authority to restrict our right to bear arms, then they cannot do so with a treaty. Beautiful Supreme Court ruling. Every once in a while, even a blind squirrel finds a nut. The Supreme Court got it right. Today, we have the federal government doing many things clearly outside the bounds of their power, such as, where's the power for foreign aid, federal housing programs, or education? There should be no Department of Education. Transportation, in particular, the TSA has had a lot of press, for good reason. Department of Energy, not authorized by the Constitution either. What about federal government taking from the states and the people vast areas of land to designate as wilderness areas? They're not given that power either. Wildlife, that's not within the jurisdiction of the federal government. And of course, healthcare. Unfortunately, this list could be far larger of things they are doing that they shouldn't be, but we don't have the time to go into all of that. But so often I get asked the question, some of these things the federal government's doing that are not on your list here are so needed. It's for a good cause. We just have to do good in this Department of Education and helping our children have good educations or whatever. Whether we could debate back and forth whether or not they're even accomplishing that. But when we talk about this, it's for a good cause, so therefore we need to ignore the Constitution. George Washington, in his farewell address in 1796, gave us a warning on this topic. He said, if, in the opinion of the people, the distribution or modification of constitutional powers, the way we set up the Constitution, is in any particular wrong, let it be corrected by an amendment in the way in which the Constitution designates. But let there be no change by usurpation. For though this in one instance may be the instrument of good, It is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. Again, we let them take one step outside the bounds of the Constitution. They now have boundless fields of power. There's no logical place to rein them in. So, remember the brake pads that weren't changed out on the car. There are many duties Congress has given that they are not fulfilling today. They should never allow our troops to go to war and fund a war unless they have actually debated and declared a war. We'll talk about that in lecture 4. They need to also fulfill their duty to repel an invasion. They're only supposed to raise armies, not maintain an army on an ongoing basis, which is interesting. We'll talk about that in lecture 4 as well. Power to coin money, we'll talk about next time in lecture 3, which they're not fulfilling that duty. They're supposed to organize state militia, and what we have today in lecture 4 will clearly define the difference between what we do have and what the constitutional militias are supposed to be. Very different. Impeachment of judges. They do that occasionally, but I can tell you there are many judges that need to be impeached. One particular one recently, who Ruth Bader Ginsburg declared, I really look more to international law than I do to the U.S. Constitution for my rulings. She then admitted she probably violated her oath of office in the process. Yes, you did, and yes, you should be impeached. And yet we're told judges are appointed for life. That's not what the Constitution.
Well, she might have said something that she shouldn't have said, but the truth is, that's what the corporation would have her do. So it wouldn't be just Ginsburg that would be guilty of that. They got us all in a whole international jurisdiction, because they're not going by the Continental Constitution. We really got to find out the difference between the 3 constitutions. One is continental, one is territorial, meaning it's the sea jurisdiction. The other one is the jurisdiction of the air, and that's the municipal. And that's the Vatican one. Territorial is the crown. The municipal is the Vatican. Those are the 2 primary entities that's all up in our Kool-Aid, okay? I don't care who they sold it to or who has it now, or who. A lot of people think that Britain ain't involved no more. That's incorrect. You don't leave this kind of money bag, y'all. You don't leave and not grab this bag called America. Ain't nobody trying to leave America. They got all the indigenous paying them for us to live on our land. Can you imagine that? So they ain't trying to give up this money bag, y'all. No. They ain't gone nowhere. They haven't gone anywhere. They just disguised, just like the Moors. Put all the what do you call it? Hugo, man of the 1,000 faces. Was that toy that they had years ago? If you're old enough to remember, a little man that you could put on any face on him, make him look like 1,000 different men. That's what the Moors are about. That's a perfect little Moor game, or whatever it was, dressy or dress up. You could make him bald-headed. You could make him with hair. You could have a mustache, a beard, glasses, a pipe, whatever. Changes, I don't know. Probably change his eye color, change his eyebrows, or whatever. You can do it. That ain't nothing but a Moorish little thing going on, because, you know, even Mr. Potato Head. Mr. Potato Head, I made you. That's the Moors. So they come in a million disguises because they don't want us to see that it's just another nigga trying to grab your shit. So he got all these other people hiding behind. So that's what's going on with the corporation. You know? So fair use, let us continue. This brother is getting it in. He is laying it out for us, indigenous. Laying it out. Let's continue. We're gonna go back a little bit. And then after this is over, we're gonna call it a day, because I know we've gotten so, between the last video today and this video now, that's like probably over 5 hours of video, right? Ain't nobody got time for that, even if it is the greatest knowledge in the world, right? Fair use.
I really look more to international law than I do to the US Constitution for my rulings. She then admitted she probably violated her oath of office in the process. Yes, you did. And yes, you should be impeached. And yet we're told judges are appointed for life. That's not what the Constitution says.
Not what the
It doesn't give any term of limit of how long they can serve, but it does say during times of good behavior. Good behavior. And if not, then they should be impeached. Well, I would say that openly admitting you're violating your oath of office is not good behavior, if ever there was bad behavior. And this is the final one that so many of our elected officials are ignoring, is their duty to uphold their oath of office, to actually follow
How about that?
the limits of power of the Constitution.
How about that?
The only way we can get back to the Constitution then, the power is really in us. And our states. It's up to the states and the people to reign in the
Hello, any indigenous
so as Madison points out in Federalist Number 44, there's a reason.
Wait. Do y'all understand the validity of the profundity of what he said? Who has that authority more than any foreigner? Who has it? That would be the American Indian. The ones who are trying to, work with this fraudulent, out of order, constitution breaking corporation. Oh my God! As I watch this video, if we can't understand the crimes they are committing to this day, and walking forward boldly, wrong and strong, we can't do business with this, y'all. They are far too used to doing shit this way, so just want to step aside and let us take control. That's why we have to do it, indigenous, and we can do it in a very low. All we got to do is realize what he's saying and repeat it in our favor. In other words, when we face this corporation, first of all, we're going to tell them who we are. We're the indigenous, okay? We're the American Indian. And you have no jurisdiction over us, but we have jurisdiction over you. Okay? So we are cleaning house. We don't really require your services anymore. We only needed you to be in these seats once a year minimum, or a minimum. And so what you're doing, it doesn't seem like it's benefiting any of the indigenous. In fact, it just made matters much worse for American Indians, everything you've done. So again, indigenous, with your common sense working, how do we work with something like this? There's nothing to work with. It's all fraud and backstabbing and treaty breaking, unconstitutional behavior and lies and deceits and threats and duress to get jabs and shit by executive orders that are not constitutional. The president don't make laws, y'all. Congress do, but they're doing it. They ain't doing shit right either. We got to clean house. This ain't about let's make a deal. Fuck make a deal. Take your clown ass on out of here. Take that costume you wearing, calling yourself American. And no, there's no prize today behind door number 1. I'm behind door number 1. Surprise. So that's the deal. You lose. Bye-bye. No free money, no new car, no trip to Hawaii. We're not making no deal. It's really simple. It's really simple. We have to get, similar to what Dane said, we got to get a majority of our people to stand up and take our country back, okay? Dane said 13%, okay. That's all right with me. We got to get these people motivated now. What's our mission? It's really simple, and it's going to be really easy if we all work together. And I think we can learn a lot from the state nationals. I won't lie. I think we should work with them. But part of our work with them is redefining their stay as well in a cordial, civil, humane manner. We go nicely letting them know that that old regime is gone now, but we're here. So you report to us, okay? That's all we're saying. When you have your assembly meetings, we're going to need some notes. We're going to know what you're talking about, and we might sit in on them. We are free to do so. You are on our landmass. You are American, but you are not American Indian. And what we just gone through, we ain't not fitting to do that again. So we don't trust nobody. Okay? We having a hard enough time getting these silly ass Moors to know what time it is. We don't even trust our own, okay? So of course we're gonna come check, clean house, see what you're doing up in here. What's going on? What y'all planning to do? Oh, okay, that sounds all right. We could work with that. All right. That's how it's gotta be. And if people hear this and say, who he think he is? What is that? I'm an American Indian, motherfucker. That's who I am. Yeah, I'm sorry. I got a little disrespectful. But I got to let you know I'm not joking when I say that. I'm not gonna half step on my authority. I'm not gonna cower. No, I can't at this point. The ancestors done gave me too much to think about for me to stand here and be a punk and cower when I say what I say. We are the authority, American Indian. No, I can't do it by myself. What Indians are out there who are feeling what's being said today? Okay, let's get this ship going. Okay, now let's not call it a ship, but there ain't no more anymore. We ain't got no boats up in this. We on land. Let's boots to the ground. We got to take our country back, indigenous. And I had no idea that the ancestors would give me some of the groundwork on how to do that and the reasoning behind it. They just throwing it at me today, throwing it at me, and I'm here to try to give it to you. Thank you for listening. And now let's see if we could end this and not keep our mouth yapping so much. Okay. Fair use. Let's continue.
Our state level officials are required to swear an oath of office, not just to their state constitution, but also to the federal constitution. At the end of Federalist 44, he addresses this question. In his answer, he says, the members and officers of the state governments will have the essential agency in giving effect to the Constitution, making it effective. Is the Constitution today effective in reining in our federal government? I'm afraid not. And if that's the case, who's to blame? Primarily, it's our state level officials, but secondarily, it's we the people not holding them accountable for holding the federal government accountable. That's the way the power process works. That's the way the Constitution was formed. We, the people, empowered the states. The states then formed the Constitution. And that's the same way we rein it in. So nullification is the topic that we started off with. And that's really where we need to conclude then. To dispel the myths, nullification is not some kind of a seditious act or rebellion or treason against the federal government.
Thank you.
It's not lawlessness. We're not seceding from the Union. It's not even civil disobedience. It's actually obeying the law.
How about
holding
that?
The Constitution.
How about that?
When our state level officials, our governors, our state legislators, our sheriffs, and so on, are faced with a decision, do I follow the federal government or do I follow the Constitution? Which one did they swear an oath to?
The Constitution.
Clearly, it was the Constitution.
Thank you.
The only way we can see this happen then is if our state level officials will understand and apply this. Thomas Jefferson tells us that the several states who formed the instrument of the Constitution have the unquestionable right to judge of its infraction. And a nullification by those sovereignties, the states, of unauthorized acts done under the color of that instrument is the rightful remedy.
Again, indigenous, just one more thing. We might reside in the states, but our sovereignty level is above and beyond any state. You hear me? We are the primaries. We are the supreme on the land, okay? Again, this is not arrogance. This is the way it is on any other people's country, okay? That's all it is. Stop being offended when I say that America belongs to American Indians. Just stop it. You're out of order, okay? That's why you have a homeland to run to where American Indians don't. So that's why we have to take our control. We don't got nowhere to run to. They just trying to get rid of us altogether, and that ain't gonna happen. We are the ancestors got our numbers up so high that it done scared this corporation into needing a jab to deal with it. Okay. So yeah. So what I'm saying is we have authority over the states as well. They don't have jurisdiction over us, but we do have jurisdiction over them. Why? Because this is our land. I don't care how you diced it and sliced it. I don't care what you call it. I was here before, and I will be here after you. That's and the only way you're gonna obstruct that is by brainwashing us, and we're not having that no more. We're not having that anymore. You hear that, Moors? Fair use.
Case, he tells us, without this right, they would be under the dominion, absolute and unlimited, of whosoever might exercise the right of judgment for them. Who are we told today has the right to judge if something is constitutional or not? Only the Supreme Court.
Ah.
Well, that would put us under the dominion, absolute and unlimited, according to Jefferson, of the Supreme Court.
Aha.
And that is partially where we are already today. So what we need in order to make this work
is the Indians.
Is governors.
No.
First and foremost.
Well.
Who are willing to stand by their oath of office, who understand the importance of giving effect to the Constitution. And then a majority of state legislators who understand and will back him on that. It doesn't take every state legislator. But even one governor isn't really enough. If you have one state that stands up to the federal government, they generally are bullied into submission. A classic example of this was the Real ID Act of 2005, which was the establishment of a national ID card, which was very invasive into personal information that they were wanting to collect on a national database. Many states were very opposed to it. Here in Montana, where I'm from, our own state legislature passed a bill saying we will not, under any circumstances, implement the Real ID Act. And our governor signed it. And shortly we found that we were standing with 12 states, standing together. And with that, the federal government backed down and said, we'll give you some more time to implement this.
Okay, y'all. So what is a governor in a nation of nation states? He's the president, right? See, we get it confused because of the way this thing is designed. Okay, this is the Pilgrim's Law, but I'm saying we got jurisdiction over the presidents, over the governors, as American Indians. We don't give anybody free reign on our land. Do we understand that or no? And am I saying something that's not right? So we are going to be in everything. Again, what we just come through is enough proof that we can't allow anyone to run our show. We're not supposed, even though what he just said sounds really nice for some Indians, yeah, I would like a governor we're not supposed to be in that system, indigenous. What about that don't you understand? And now some people might say, well, if we're in it, maybe we can control it better. We're supposed to be above it. That's how you control it. That's how you really have sovereignty. We don't have to be in it, because that is a level that we should be above it as the indigenous of the land. So we have our own system. That's what's going to be what teaches the people of the land who we are. No one is going to teach these foreigners who we are but us. So we have to have an authority. I would say that we would, like I said before, we would need to start doing a public school system where we retrain every foreigner on just what they are stepping into, whose land this is. Okay, so we will have to do something like that. No, we don't need their governors. That's for them, because then, we'll be in their tax system, and we're not supposed to be in tax, right? We are supposed to be the overlords, the landlords of this, collecting the tax, using that money for our posterity, for our bloodline, to make sure that they stay in control. We have to have somewhat of a, what would I call it? Almost like an FBI organization, to make sure that the shit runs as we say for the next 25,000 years, and the 25,000 years after that, and the 25,000 years after that, because that's what the Moors have with the priesthood. They done made it a freaking religion, how to kicking our ass for the rest of our natural life on earth. They done turned it into a religion. That's what we have to have to make sure that no fools get the notion that they can do what the Moors just did to us. We have to keep a sacred watch. And maybe that movie, The Sentinel, we need some sentinels to watch. Watchers. To make sure that no foul shit will ever do what we had these fucking Moors do on our landmass. It all came from the Moors once you realize what the Mongol Empire was. So we're gonna draw this to the last segment of, I guess we got 3.5 minutes more, basically, or 2.5 minutes more of this video, and I'm gonna let you go for the night. And I don't know if I'm gonna try to do another one tomorrow. I don't know what the ancestors gonna do. So yeah, fair use. Let's hear the man finish.
Time that next deadline came up, 28 states were standing together saying, we will not implement this. And they've since
the real
put it to the back burner. Now they're trying to implement a piecemeal through our Department of Motor Vehicles, but that's another matter. The point is, we stop that bad law by states standing together. And that's the only way that we can truly rein in the federal government, is first with the states. And then secondarily, we need to replace Congress with those that will stand by their oath of office as well.
Indigenous, he just said it. That's what, that will be us. We will replace Congress with all, if we can help it, all indigenous. That's what, in other words, okay, it's a two things going on here. We are going to clean house, but the basic framework that laid out our Constitution, it required, a Congress and all of that. So we have two responsibilities. One, governing ourselves, and the other, governing the foreign. That's just the way it is. They don't get free reign and just to do what you want on this landmass. You go home to do that because that's where your authority would be. Back in the day when people got expelled, it was the foreigners that were getting expelled, just like we did with the Moors. They were acting like foreigners, and then they got treated like foreigners. Once you go against our guidelines and what our traditions are, you are a foreigner. That's why the Moors are not really our family. Once you go against the family, just like in the mafia, baby, you out. The Moors know all about that. That the mafia is one of their, pretty much, they children having a gang, right? So they know about this law about going against the family. Don't you, Moors? Y'all gonna play stupid again? Yet again? The ones who know everything about law and yet didn't come to Congress and tell them that they only had 19 enumerated powers. You come and run into the American Indian, talk about, well, you need to become a Moor so you could deal with this abuse. Nigga, go sit your ass down. That's what a Moor is to me, a true nigga. Okay? A true nigga. Okay? So I like what he just said because he's saying we do have to clean house, but who's going to do it? Are we going to put that in the hands of strangers again, indigenous? So it's going to be different, but somewhat the same. You know what I mean? Once we take the seats, that's going to make this correct. So again, here, let me say it again, because I know what I'm saying. It sounds like I'm saying we're going to have two systems, right? Well, let's try to narrow that down. How about we can still have one system somewhat, but when we are in control. So then we won't need to, because we're going to be in control. We're going to have the seat of power. We're going to change it up a little bit. You know, we did pretty much design the Constitution. So maybe we just need to be in those seats of power instead of having the people who are there now working for the crown. Maybe that's the solution. Maybe we don't need the only time you need a two government system is when you're allowing another nation to act as if they are a separate authority. But if we check that and we become the only authority, we won't need to have two nations. You see what I'm saying, American Indian? It will be known that we are the authority, and we're supposed to be. So that's what we got to think about. I keep talking in terms of having a separate government, but the truth is, we only need one. Us. The American Indian. We won't need two if there's no other one here. You see what I'm saying? Oh, we won't need to. The foreigner will have to, we will be their upling. We will be the authority we're supposed to be. Okay, so I'll try not to interrupt them again. Fair use.
And ultimately, the responsibility for all of that does rest with us. With we the people. The only reason they get away with what they are right now, how many people understand what we've covered today? If you were to do a survey around your community, how many people could tell you what the powers are and are not under the general welfare, under the Commerce Clause, and so on? How many people in Washington could? I find even they're often simply just ignorant of it. Some of them do willfully disobey it, but I think many of them are just ignorant of their limits of power. And if this becomes common knowledge again, then we the people can rein in our government back to
the Indian,
what they're actually supposed to be doing.
Right.
Preserving our liberty and reining in the federal budget at least 80% eventually. So with that will conclude our lecture on the Constitution, enumerated versus unlimited power. And in the next lecture, we'll go into some of the specifics of the power, monetary power, and further lectures on the world powers in lecture number 4. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks to the John Birch Society. This was a great video. We can learn so much from these types of videos. So, fair use, thank you to the John Birch Society. The Constitution is the solution, but I think we better even make it more specific. The original Continental Constitution is the solution. That's the one that we crafted. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to thank you once again. I know it's a lot that's being put out. I hope, particularly American Indians are taking note. This is what we need to be talking about, not fighting with Moors on platforms and all that foolishness, wasting time. Your children are growing older by the minute and you still arguing with a Moor. Your child is like, could you just focus on what we are, dad, mom, whatever? Can you just focus on what I need to be? You fighting with the enemy, and I'm here confused because I don't know. I ain't getting no knowledge. All I'm seeing is how many ways you got to tell these Moors that you're not them and they're not you. They're the ones with the identity crisis. Okay, we finding out who we are. We had an identity crisis because we had no clue. Now that we know, what is there to argue about? We're not Moors. They're not mentioned in our Constitution. They're not part of this. Just because they recognize this fraudulent corporation don't mean that they was part of it. In fact, for you to recognize it, you had to be foreign to, you was another nation, wasn't you? They trying to confuse us like I don't know what. But hopefully their confusion lands and ends in their own heads, because they're the ones that's causing all this chaos. And hopefully that chaos will come to bring them the confusion that they are seeking so badly. So on that note, again, thank you for watching. Peace, love, joy, wealth, health, you know, the whole bit. Your land back, your sovereignty back, all of your sovereignty back, not the half-stepping with, oh, let's work with the corporation. Let's not. They've worked with us enough, okay? And we see that they, again, working overtime to kick our ass. That's the only reason why they're in that often every day of the year, except 2 weeks in Christmas when the guy said they go out with their secretaries or whatever. We told them we need you to do this what? At least once a year. They are in there 364 days too many. So this was very eye-opening for me, and I hope it was for you. Once again, peace, love, joy, wealth, health, and all the good, all the great things. Thank you.